Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Brian Winters is back in the nerd zone. We were just chatting before going live that you were last on this show a couple years ago with Nell and some other channel members. So, welcome back, man. How have you been?
Pretty good. Good to see you again.
So, tell me a little bit about what ensued in the last couple of years for you. It sounds like you've been pretty busy.
Yes, I've been working on building up the American Union as a way to fix our political structure and try and get a lot of good policy before Congress. Yeah, so that's what's been going on for the last couple of years.
Now, how was that transition like? Were you how into I'm guessing you're pretty closely following the presidential campaign in 2020. Like when did you decide to pursue the American Union and how would you describe what it is for folks who haven't heard about it?
Sure. Well, the American Union is a union of swing voters because swing voters are the ones who have the most power in the electorate. And the idea is to come together behind a specific policy package. That's the blueprint for a better America. It has about
Mm.
50 different policies in it that end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. And then use our block of votes to collectively bargain with Congress. And so the deal for Congress is put this legislation on the president's desk before the election. And if you do, we can reelect you all. Republicans or Democrats, we don't care. We just want to see Congress solve some problems for the American people. But if they refuse, then we can support their major party opponents. And again, by being swing voters, they're the ones who have the most leverage. So I'm here in North Carolina, where it would take about a block of 2% of the voters to control the outcome of the U.S. Senate seat.
So how do you get translate these policy ideas into actual voter activation? You know, it seems like those being able to harness the power of those few thousand voters is incredible, but really would seem like it would be hard to do. So how do you actually go from hey, we've got a bunch of great ideas to now like I've got voters who are going to hold representatives accountable for executing these ideas?
Sure. Well, the question really is what do you want Congress to do? Like if you could actually put a piece of legislation on the president's desk, what do you want? What do you want Congress to solve? And so there's a lot of popular policies within this legislative package. Ending poverty is done with universal basic income of $1,300 a month, a public option for health insurance, 18 weeks of paid family leave. Some of these things are incredibly popular, and yet Congress fails to act. Ending mass incarceration has a lot of criminal justice reform issues that many people are very passionate about around the country. And so here's a way to come together as part of a larger group to get action on the issues that are really so important to them. And then ending the endless wars involves downsizing the military industrial complex and refocusing those energies in more productive ways. And again, there's lots of passionate people in the peace movement. And so by bringing together these three groups of people into under one umbrella, you can, we're all, that's the point of a union, is that we're all stronger together when we negotiate together.
The term union is different than a political party that runs its own candidates and sort of has people on the ballot. How did you think about that a union versus a party, let's say?
Well, Tom, I've been involved in politics for a long time. So about 20 years ago, I was involved with the Libertarian Party and third party politics. And so I saw firsthand, the ways that the duopoly works to keep third parties off of the ballot and the hurdles that they face, both in the laws and rules and just structurally, the hurdles that they face trying to compete against Republicans and Democrats. So I realized third parties weren't the way to change the system. And so I picked Team Democrat and served a number of terms in the New Hampshire legislature and got a chance to see how the sausage was made from the inside. And I realized that it's very hard to change the system from inside, that there's a lot of inertia to the way it is. And two, lobbyists have an awful lot of power. There were many times when lobbyists would come before my committee and say, okay, this is what we'd like. And lots of times we would just rubber stamp what they wanted done. And that was how bills became law. And so in the 21st century, we the people can lobby for ourselves. But we don't have to sit in one room in Washington, D.C. to hash out deals. We can communicate and collaborate across the country. And so the American Union is a way for people to come together with one voice, with one set of legislative demands, and lobby for ourselves using not money, but using our votes, and because that's what politicians ultimately need to get elected.
So let's say, as an example, you go to your congressional representative and you say, "Hey, look, I'm very passionate and I represent a lot of people who feel strongly about these three policy objectives: ending poverty, mass incarceration, and endless wars." And your representative says, "Well, Brian, these are great ideas, but ultimately my job is to represent the people. But in order to do that, I need to get reelected. And the best way for me to get reelected is to focus on the hot topics of the moment, and that's immigration, pronouns, and whatever. You know, how do you like be? And in a way, like a lot of voters care about those topics more so, sadly, than poverty, mass incarceration, endless wars. I mean, that's what gets the base riled up and gets what people to participate. How do you respond if they kind of give you that, like, "Hey, look, this is the game I'm playing here"?
Well, two parts. One, Tom, that's half the problem that our political system has, is it's about getting people riled up instead about actually channeling that energy into constructive solutions. We've been playing this game for the last 20, 30 years where Republicans and Democrats just try and point fingers and say the other party's the bigger evil, you got to vote for us. And we see
Mm-hmm.
the political pendulum swing back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. But the frustrated people, the marginalized millions in this country, we can grab hold of that political pendulum and move it forward, because left and right is not doing anything. So half your question is the answer to half your question is refuse to be distracted. Pronouns may get you all riled up, but that pales in the fact compared to the fact that 37 million people in this country are living in poverty, that 2 million people are waking up behind bars, and yet we manage to spend hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars each year on the military industrial complex. These have a lot more impact than things like that. So comes back to, what do you want Congress to do? What are the problems that we want to solve? And poverty is a huge driver. And that's why Andrew Yang's proposal for universal basic income was a great way to cut through the real societal issues and address the root causes. And that's why universal basic income is an essential part of this legislative package. And I think I
Now
forgot
look
the
at
other half of your question.
Yeah, well, I guess my main point was, hey, the system rewards certain behaviors. And even if a representative in their heart of hearts agreed with you on these policy objectives and policy priorities, they might still say, like, I don't know, Brian, like, if I go out on a limb and talk about, let's say, UBI right now, where everybody's really concerned about inflation, like, I'm going to get killed in the election. My opponent is going to say I'm a pro-inflation candidate. Or if I talk about endless wars, I'm going to get dragged into defending, either attacking or defending Biden's withdrawal. So I need to just play it safe and focus on some of these more kind of social issues that get people activated. And if it's on the Republican side, it's we could talk about pro-life. It's on the Democrat side, I'll talk about pro-choice. Like, and I don't want to get into some of these complexities because the voters, they don't respond well to that.
But that's their job. Their job as members of Congress is to deal with these complexities. And so many of the problems that we're facing in this country is because Congress is failing in their duty. They let the Supreme Court set abortion policy for 50 years. They're letting the executive branch set immigration policy. They are the legislative branch. They're supposed to act. And so by having one set of legislative demands across all 470 congressional races, we have the opportunity to change the focus and say, look, it's not just my congressman, but your congressman and this senator, and all the people who are on the ballot. This is one set of demands: end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. It's a pitch to the American people. And just as importantly, it's a pitch to their major party opponents. So if my Republican incumbent says, well, I don't want to deal with these in order to earn your block of votes, great. Then maybe their Democratic opponent wants to win that block of votes by agreeing to support and pass the blueprint for a better America if they are elected. And so because letting Americans be divided into Republicans and Democrats, again, is causing so many problems in this country. So we flip the model around. So it's incumbents versus challengers. Incumbents get this done or be replaced with their challengers.
Okay, so let's say a challenger shows up and says, "Hey, Brian, I'm all for what you're describing. In order for me to get into a position where I can help, I've got to first win the primary." And the incumbent's been there for 20 years. Everybody knows her name, and even though I support what you're saying, I need more than a couple thousand votes. I need a serious effort here. Otherwise, I'm just going to get killed. What would you say to them?
So first, this is a general election offer. So
Hmm.
it doesn't relate to political primaries necessarily. But the other part is that so October 15th is the day where we expect incumbents and challengers to signify their support for the American Union's legislative package on Twitter. So essentially, it's a roll call vote for the 1,000 candidates who are running for federal office on October 15th. And so challengers would have to chime in and publicly signify their support. That they want to see America end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars, and that they share this demand for Congress to immediately pass this legislation. Now, if their incumbent does, if they get what they ask for, then
Hmm.
they're expected to support the endorsement of the reelection of the incumbent. So there's a gamification aspect of challengers can't just say that they want to do this. They have to actually make a public commitment and be willing to support the incumbent if our terms are met.
And if the challenger says, yes, I commit to this, and let's say this is a general election, so they're already on the ballot, what do they get from the American Union? Is there a ground game, or is there an army of volunteers? Like, how do they, other than the fact that, well, maybe we all agree these are great policies, what what kind of help do they get to actually win that election?
Well, so the technical answer is that they only get the endorsement. The American Union is
Hmm.
set up as a super PAC so that we can raise money for influencing the election, but none of that can go to the candidates themselves. It only goes to grow the American Union. So no, there is no funneling of money or volunteers into campaigns, only to spreading the message that Americans can work together, that we don't need Republicans and Democrats to represent us anymore. We can represent ourselves to solve these problems.
Got it. So if it is a super PAC, doesn't that would allow you to run ads
Yes.
supporting that candidate? Is that part of the strategy, or is it mainly to get
Well,
the union big enough so that it's just not just, but you have this army of voters, and if they hear that, oh well, the American Union endorses Bob, then I'll vote for Bob, kind of thing, because I know that he's behind the things I care about.
sure. Yeah, it'd be a combination of both those things, depending on what the budget looks like. So, if you got any viewers who want to write $1 million check to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars, they can donate to our super PAC.
Yeah, how do they find out more? What's the best way to get to
The,
know more about the efforts?
the best way is the website anamericanunion.com, and there's a lot of
Okay.
information there as far as all the different policies that are included in the legislation, the endorsement strategy, and many different blog posts and videos going into greater depth about how this process works.
All right. And AmericanUnion.com. I'll put that up on the screen here for people who are curious to learn more. How's it been going? What's the response been in terms of, um, people joining the effort, donating funds, or volunteering, or what's it like out there in the real world with
Well,
this effort?
it could always be better, but as you're sensing, this isn't a something that fits into a soundbite, right? This is a different political paradigm. The founding fathers didn't want America to end up with political parties. They tried to steer us away from that. And however, we've sort of gotten stuck in that model for the last 200 years. And so this idea of moving away from political parties and instead letting voters represent themselves takes a little bit to wrap your mind around that. But some people are interested in policy. There's a lot of policy nerds out there that like to dig into the specific details of how exactly do we solve these problems, because candidates running for office can make these sort of nebulous promises like elect me and I will fix healthcare. Well, what does that mean exactly? So
Mm-hmm.
go to the website, you can read exactly how we institute a public option for health insurance, all the laws and things that get changed. Same, you can read exactly how UBI would be implemented, how we would reform our criminal justice system. It's all written down in a very specific proposal. And again, the deal for Congress is put it on the president's desk before the election, and you'll be the most popular, most transformational Congress in generations. You know, as you know, Tom, Congress's popularity is pretty low. From 2010 to 2020, they only hit 30% from below. They only hit it one time, and that was when
Mm-hmm.
they passed the CARES Act, because people were excited that Congress was actually doing something, and they got up to 30% approval. So if they could actually solve these problems, they'd be incredibly popular and reelected in a landslide.
You have this interesting PDF from the An American Union website that talks about an American Union job equals universal basic income. And there's definitely some details here. Tell us a little bit about, um, how would this have differed from the UBI proposal that Yang had that was funded by a VAT? Uh,
Sure.
have what's the similarities and differences?
Yeah. So the name of the Universal Basic Income Program is the American Union Jobs Program. It is not an actual job. It's just the name of the program, because it's a reminder that as Americans, we have duties to each other, to our country. And so it's a reminder that for $300 a week, go out and be a better American, however you see fit. And it's also a way of helping people wrap their mind around a public option to say, okay, your American Union job comes with benefits
Mm.
that you can get insurance through that job that you'll always have, so you don't have to do employer-based insurance. As far as the technical details, unlike Andrew Yang's proposal, this includes a children's dividend of 1/3. So it's $1,300 a month for adults, $433 for kids. And that's enough to actually lift every single American family up above the poverty line, as a starting point. The three main ways that it's funded is through a 12% value-added tax, a pollution fees on carbon and on plastic, and then through deficit financing through new money. And so that's how we pay for the universal basic income.
So one of the things that's a very top of mind issue at the moment is illegal immigration or undocumented workers or migrants who are fleeing persecution. And I remember when Yang ran, there was people asked like, "Well, it's going to be a magnet because if you can get basic income in the U.S., like why wouldn't you try and come here? Even more likely." How would you think about ensuring that qualified individuals receive the basic income? And you know, we also saw a lot of reports lately around all of the COVID stimulus money that a lot of people fraudulently, kind of took advantage of. Any thoughts on how to ensure that the right people, the eligible people get it. They only get it once. They don't try and double dip, those kinds of things.
Sure. Again, so this would be for Americans only, for citizens only. So
Mm-hmm.
immigrants wouldn't be able to just cross the border and then start collecting a check. How do we solve the problems of where we saw, like you say, we saw fraud, where the
Mm-hmm.
federal government knew that to stimulate the economy, they needed to push money out across the country. And so they did it in programs like the PPP, right, where you saw money go to Mississippi, and then they gave it to Brett Favre to build to do
Mm-hmm.
speeches and stuff like that. And the way the economy works is, you can add so much money to it to keep up with the growth of it. And by issuing it to people as universal basic income, you create that trickle up economy, as opposed to what we're doing now, which is trying to throw money down from the top and hope that it reaches the people at the bottom. So by switching that model around, you negate the need to try and throw larger chunks of money at the top, because it'll be coming from the bottom.
And so how Brian has this been received in your local community? I mean, you're kind of um, in a position where you're in a swing state in North Carolina. What's it been like advocating for the American Union, both with voters and with some of the representatives?
So I do a lot of canvassing in grocery store parking lots and places like that, right?
Mm,
And so lots of times people's eyes just light up when they realize there's a way to cut through this congressional gridlock, that we can hold Congress directly accountable and say, look, this is what we want done. Get it done, get our votes. And so there's that sort of grassroots enthusiasm. Among third parties, we've got a U.S. Senate seat that's up for grabs here in North Carolina, and it's going to be very close. It's going to be like a 2% block of voters that's going to control the outcome. But we've also got a Libertarian and a Green Party candidate that are on the ballot. And so they had a debate earlier this week. And so I got a chance to go there and meet with them and some of their supporters and say, look, you have all these policies that you care about, but what if instead of trying to be a spoiler in the hope that someday the major parties will get tired of being spoiled and they will adopt some of your policies, and then that way you can win indirectly? Or instead of adopting ranked choice voting, so that you can vote for your principal candidate first and then elect the duopoly candidate anyway, what if you just bargained with your votes directly and said, look, these are the policies we want, these are the votes that we're bringing to the table, who wants to win? And so there's some people who are passionate about some of these issues, like the idea of collectively bargaining to improve our social contract.
And so how would that actually work um, in a little more detail? So it would require some of these third party supporters to all uh, affirm that, hey, whichever of the candidates signs up for these priorities, like I'm going to basically vote on these issues. I'm going to become like not a single issue voter, but I'm going to become a voter around these American Union issues.
Yeah.
And then the candidates would need to be convinced that there's enough of those people that are really going to follow through. How does that happen? Like in the nuts and bolts, like how do you actually convince them? And what do they sign a petition, or how does that work?
Yeah. So there is a petition, but you can join and become a dues paying member of the American Union for $5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the number of dues paying members is a way to signify to the candidates for office that, these people aren't just, clicking a button on Twitter or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, that they're actually putting some skin in the game. As I said, October 15th is essentially a national election, a roll call vote to see where all the candidates stand. And then over the rest of October, depending on whether or not Congress is willing to act, we'll be making endorsements by the end of the month. And so that members of the American Union, they all make a good faith pledge to support either the Republican or the Democrat who gets the endorsement in all these congressional races. And October 15th, again, is the opportunity for them to weigh in and build this public pressure by sharing their commitment on Twitter on social media to vote with the American Union.
So Jonathan in the chat is curious, how many current members are there in the American Union?
There is not enough to swing the outcome of most elections, but there's about 1,000 people on the email list.
And I'm curious why the focus on general election versus primaries, because I would imagine if you try and impact the primary outcomes, it might even take fewer votes to help a candidate get over the hump. How did you all think about that?
Because so we've talked about some of the policies, right, and how those are to help America heal its political problems. But America has other problems too, and one of them is the way that we are forced to choose Team Republican or Team Democrat, and that how they use these wedge issues to drive us apart and to keep us pitted against each other. And so, how do we help heal that process? And the answer is by addressing the general election and saying, look, what sort of good faith offer could we make to both candidates of both parties, and say, look, we don't care which one of you does this, but here's a reasonable offer that either one of you can accept, and we'd be happy as long as it gets done. Political primaries tend to be more polarizing and more divisive, and they also don't have, because they're staggered, there isn't that same opportunity to have one day of action across all 470 races, the way that the general election, we can do that.
Now, I see on your website that you're not avoiding tough issues. There's actually a whole section on guns and abortion. Tell us a little more about the American Union's position on that issue, because it's definitely gets people pretty animated on either side.
It does, and that's why Republicans and Democrats use these as wedge issues. As you can see there, fear fuels the two-party system, right? The other party's going to take your guns or abortions away. You got to vote for us. We're the lesser of two evils. And so this legislative package contains a truce where no abortion bans, no gun bans could be introduced in Congress for 10 years. And as part of this truce, everybody gives something up, everybody gets something. So the legislation also codifies the Hyde Amendment, which would prevent federal dollars from being used to fund abortions. And it also includes universal background checks. Both of those things are also popular with the majority of Americans, as well as only a minority of Americans want to ban all abortions and ban all guns. And this was written before the Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade. And so it was more hypothetical to say you couldn't introduce any abortion bans in Congress at the time. But as we've seen in the last week, there are actual proposals that would, on a national level, restrict a woman's right to choose. So here's an opportunity to come together and say, look, we want these taken off the table for 10 years because we're not just kicking the can down the road, but we want to focus on what are the core problems. What are the reasons that women seek abortions? Well, 2/3 of them say that they can't afford the baby. What are the reasons that we have so many needless gun deaths in the country? Well, most of them are suicides. How do we address the issues that lead people to suicide? And so by going after these core causes, the legislative package will drive down the number of abortions and drive down the number of needless gun deaths. And so in 10 years, we can reevaluate and see where we're at as a country. But by addressing the root issues, we can address the problems that people who advocate for these bans really want to solve in the first place.
How do you define bans? I noticed that Senator Lindsey Graham recently introduced legislation that would prevent a woman from getting an abortion, I think, after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Is that considered a ban? Or because I think a lot of the pro-life people would say that's not really a ban. It's more of a kind of restriction of access for people far along in the pregnancy. What would your take be on that?
So, Tom, you've highlighted the benefit of unionizing his voters because the answer is specifically written down. It's not a candidate who's making some nebulous promise that might be changed later. And so the answer is in section 221 of the legislative package. And so Congress would be prohibited from introducing anything that would prohibit or restrict access to abortion. So reducing the number of weeks that women could access abortion would restrict access to abortion, and it would be a Class B misdemeanor for members of Congress to break that prohibition, which is subject to a penalty of 5 to 30 days in jail. So if members feel very passionate about this and would like to commit civil disobedience to try and introduce these bans, great. They can spend one of their many, many paid vacations in the county jail if they like.
And what's the grocery store parking lot response to the American Union's position on healthcare? Did you say is the position Medicare for all or something, a public option?
Joe Biden promised the American people a public option when he ran for
Mm-hmm.
president. So great, let's put one on his desk and make him sign it. Because as the pandemic showed us, tying employment and health insurance together is a terrible idea, that millions of people lost their jobs and insurance through no fault of their own. And so the public option is a way that anybody could buy a plan from the government, a nonprofit entity. It would also repeal the restrictions on subsidies. So right now, if your employer offers you an insurance plan and you don't take it, you're not eligible to get a subsidy for a plan on the exchange. That would be repealed. Likewise, the legislative package repeals the large employer mandate that says if you've got over 50 full-time employees, you have to offer insurance. Because, as Andrew Yang said during the debates, let's take this burden off of businesses, right? You don't go into business looking to take care of your employees' health insurance needs. And so let's take this burden off of businesses with a public option, and let people buy plans separately so that they can change jobs and not be tied to one specific employer.
Now, I don't hold this view, but there are some who would argue, oh, the moment you introduce a public option, this is the beginning of a government takeover of healthcare, and you'll have death panels and 12-month wait lists to just get basic care, and this is socialism, and the government shouldn't be involved in people's business like this.
So there's a couple answers to that. One, of course, is that this is a specific legislative proposal, right? This legislation does not set up Medicare for all or anything like that. It is one piece of legislation for either an up or a down vote. Those are the choices. Do you want to do these things or not? But then the other part of that is that we've accepted the fact that government should be the safety net. They should be the provider of last resort if somebody needs health care. That's part of our social contract. But there's nothing that says the government has to be the competitor of last resort. That allowing the government to compete in the marketplace for insurance customers will keep the for-profit industries more honest. Sort of the way that the Tennessee Valley Authority was set up to sell electricity to people in the region as a way of keeping the other electric companies honest, making sure that they were only charging fair prices and not gouging their customers. So we can use that same sort of idea with health insurance. And then last but not least, again, this is what Joe Biden campaigned on. This is what he promised the American people. And yet there's been no action on it in Congress. So let's force them to act by coming together and saying, Congress, end poverty and mass incarceration and end the endless wars.
Well, Brian, it has been great to learn more about the American Union effort. I definitely agree with a lot of those policy priorities you're laying out there. And I really hope that you're able to amass enough support to influence these candidates to focus on the issues that matter to most people, and avoid kind of the cheap wins of just stirring the pot with the social issue of the day, because it doesn't get us anywhere. And hopefully you'll be back on the show periodically to give us an update on what's new with the American Union. Any final calls to action or topics that you wanted to hit before we wrap up?
Sure. Once again, check out the website, anamericanunion.com. But you hit on another good point there, Tom, at the end about building enough support. And one of the things that makes a union of voters different than a third party is the amount of support that you need. A third party needs 35% of the vote in order to elect one candidate. But as a national union of swing voters, you only need 3.5% in order to control the balance of power in Washington, D.C. And so that's a much more doable block of support to build rather than a national third party. And by, again, you don't have to change any laws. You don't have to change any rules. You don't have to find rich candidates and raise hundreds of millions of dollars to compete. You just need 3.5% of principled people who are willing to work together and vote together and leverage their votes for political change. So,
Brian, one last question that then comes to mind is, as a former Yang 2020 supporter, what is your take on Andrew? Working with Christine Todd Whitman and some other folks to try and put together a third party. Do you feel like, oh man, that guy's going to run into a brick wall? And what's your take?
I mean, my first take was I was really disappointed to see universal basic income drop off of the Ford Party platform. I can understand the political expediency of it, but it's a really good solution for solving America's problems. So I was disappointed to see that go away. But as I mentioned earlier, I've tried the third party route and I've watched them over the last 2 decades, and I can see all the reasons why third parties don't work. The biggest of these is Duverger's law, which is because we elect people in single member districts, we end up with a 2-party system because this is basic market efficiency, that you only want one losing campaign per district. For the idea of having 3 or 4 or 5 political parties all mounting $100 million campaign for one U.S. Senate seat, it's not a sustainable business model. And so that's why we continually have ended up with a 2-party system ever since George Washington stopped being president. So my best hope for the Ford Party is that the Republican Party fractures and I'm going to say the sane Republicans move to the Ford Party and it becomes the other half of the duopoly. But you can't really change that dynamic that we have a 2-party system until you change the switch to multi-member districts or things like that. My other concern is about the strategy of trying to disrupt Congress from the state level by changing over to ranked choice voting. And the issue is that the Constitution gives Congress in Article 1, Section 4, it gives them the authority to change the rules for federal elections at any time. And so if the Ford Party is successful in disrupting Congress and is starting to knock off incumbents, Congress can put one paragraph into some must-pass piece of legislation and require that every state elect members of Congress with first-past-the-post voting. So it seems likely to me that if you dedicate years of effort into changing the laws on the state level, that Congress will simply undo them if they're actually threatened.
Do you think, so what's your take on what happened in Alaska? Is that an example of, hey, it kind of worked, but your point remains that Congress could overturn how federal representatives are selected?
Well, yeah. I mean, if Congress wanted to, if Democrats wanted to make a play for that U.S. Senate seat, they could ban ranked choice voting right now. And so in the U.S. Senate race, where you've got 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, the Democrat would likely get the plurality of the vote in November and therefore be elected. But to a larger point, though, what Alaska has demonstrated why we have a 2-party system, because what you saw is even though you send 4 people onto the general election, and I know Forward is proposing the final 5 voting,
Mm-hmm.
that those extra candidates drop out, that it's not realistic to raise a lot of money to try and come in to compete, to come in fourth. And so it boils down to a two-way race, like in the Senate race, or a three-way race in the House. And so that's, again, is what things are going to boil down to. And the House election, where you elected the Democrat, you elected the way that the moderate Republican functioned, how they were voted out first, demonstrated a weakness in ranked choice voting, where a candidate who was preferred by a majority of members lost to someone who was preferred by a smaller number of voters.
Well, Brian, it's such a nuanced and interesting topic, and it's exciting to see so many different well-intentioned and patriotic people trying to make this country work a little better. And the American Union sounds like a really great effort, and I hope to see it grow. And I'll join the newsletter list soon.
All right.
And hope to have you back on and to keep us posted on any big milestones in the effort. And if anybody's watching this and wants to learn more, again, you can check it out at anamericanunion.com, and you can find out a lot of details and get involved and learn more. So
And
with
so,
that, oh, go ahead, Brian.
yeah, I was going to say, regardless of how the 2022 election turns out, starting in January of next year, we'll start organizing another legislative package for the 2024 election. So if you have viewers who are policy nerds and want to dig into these details of exactly how we address America's problems, make sure they sign up, and next year we can start working on another set of solutions for America.
Love it. Thanks, Brian. Goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
See you later. All right. That was Brian Winters from An American Union. Super cool to see all these folks trying to um, disrupt the current system. You've got Andrew with the third party. You've got Brian with the American Union. I'm doing my part with Of the People. I think we're all trying to pitch in and through different angles. So check it out if you want to learn more. I do also want to thank the people that make this channel possible. I don't know if you've noticed, but I just got a new webcam that has been subsidized by the channel members. I don't know if you guys see, but I think it's clearer. I think it is clearer. I think it's more detailed. So thanks to the nerds who become channel members. And who are these amazing people that support this content and this channel? The first, Jay Parent says it is clear. Yay, I'm glad because I took some of that channel member money and I said, "Oh, well, I can upgrade my video." Vaughn says I need some tan. I know. I agree. I think I think it's so accurate that it also reflects the true reality of how much I need to get out into the sun and get out of my. Oh, I think it might be frozen now. Hold on, am I frozen? No, I'm not. Oh, it's like delayed. It's delayed. Hopefully the audio is synced up. Oh, now the video is okay. That's weird. I need to mess with the settings probably. Hold on a second. Let's see here. I think it's working okay now. All right. So we get back to thanking our members. Let's thank. Yeah, it's ironic. It's ironic. Like, I'm like, hey, I've got this new camera. Thank you, members. And then it's like frozen. But all right, we're going to keep going because I think it's working now. It's a little delayed, though. Need to look into that. All right. Let's thank our channel members. We've got Soldier One, our senior vice president. He's awesome. Thank you, Soldier One, our biggest supporter. And then next up are our VPs. Ooh, I see. I think my whole laptop is kind of like slowing down. Let me see if there's something else running that's like sucking up all my bandwidth. Hopefully that helps. I just closed something. Yeah, I don't have that much else running. So we've got Kristen Slevin and Bike. So thank you, Kristen and Bike. Yeah, I need to J Parent froze again. I need to figure out I literally just plugged it in. So there's some settings that I probably need to mess with. It's probably like going at a much more aggressive rate than the computer can handle. But let's keep going. Because actually it's weird. The interview with Brian worked fine. I don't know why now it's freezing up. We'll investigate. So underneath the VPs, we have the hardcore, and they are in order of old school. Gene Lim, David, DK, Jekalego, Kirsch, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Robert, Dean, Statner, Galessa, Jay Perrin, who's in the freaking live chat right now and has been a member for 20 months. Woo! AH, Dana, Jason, Parth, Daniel, and Mickey. And this live stream is also sponsored. I don't know if it's sponsored, but basically, thank you to StreamYard for giving me a big discount on my live streaming costs. So thank you, StreamYard. And then at the verified level, which only costs $1.99 a month to join, starting with our oldest verified nerds: Lisa, Albert, Brandon, Arez, Sophia, Doris, Emerald, Ben, Rasta, James, Emma, Elizabeth, Ira, Shoni, Dr. Jameson, William, Karen, Ardent, Emery, Mai, Brittany, Warren, Wanna. Oh, Want to see more, I think, is in the chat as well. Lucky, Kevin, Nell, Mercy Ann, Toby, Jeremy. I think Jeremy was in there. David, Nicholas, Mike, Aurora, Lisa, and N. And then also channel to be deleted. Somebody's channel got deleted. I'm sorry. Hopefully you'll remain a member though. Who are our oldest members, irrespective of level? They are Lisa Childress, Jean Lim, Kristen Slevin, Albert Tom, Brandon David, Arez, and David. And who are the youngest nerds? They are N. Carter, channel has been deleted, Aurora Borealis, Lisa Mans, all less than a week old. So we got some new members. I think I put out a, it says, yeah, I think it is CPU issues, which is crazy because it's a MacBook Pro. Like you would think it can handle. But I also think the camera is trying to go at a super high frame rate. So I might adjust that. Let's see. Priority, maybe. I probably shouldn't be doing this right now. I'm going to reduce the frame rate by just a bit. Oh, did that just black me out? Okay. So I reduced the frame rate a little bit. Hopefully that. Yeah, it's gong time. Oh, gong time for new members. Yes, welcome members. Let's get the gong out. So this week was my birthday week, and I put a post saying, hey, if you really want to wish me a happy birthday, become a member or upgrade your membership. Some people responded, so thank you. And yeah, I think I reduced the frame rate, and it seems like it's less. Let's see. Now, if I share the screen, will I freeze again? This is now turned into a live streaming technical experimentation channel. But whatever. Here we go. Here's the screaming. So I'm sharing my screen, and I'm not frozen. Woohoo! Oh, back to blurry with the reduced frame rate. Oh, well, thank you for the real-time feedback. Yeah, so okay, so it's like a trade-off. I'm gonna increase the frame rate, but now we're gonna live dangerously. So now frame rate is up to 30 frames per second. Hopefully it'll be sharper, but then we have the risk of freezing. Well, it doesn't seem to be freezing now. Maybe it freezes when I like scroll. Whatever. Okay. So to the new members, I would like to give you the nerd gong. Welcome, new members. You make this cool new camera possible. Thank you, existing members. You make content for nerds possible. Okay, the other thing is I am actually going to have a call tomorrow with a freelance composer. Ah, yeah. Jay Perrin's like real-time feedback. I love it. I love it. I think it's John. Thank you, John. Is it John? Am I remembering right? Jay Perrin? Is it John? I don't know. But let me know in the chat. So the other thing I'm doing is I have a call with a freelance composer who is going to try, and I'm going to say, hey, how much would it cost to have some custom intro music, kind of like Meet the Press, that kind of gets the show started and it's exciting. Because we used to start the show with the Yang 2020 rap, the Yang 2020 anthem, but obviously we're no longer in the Yang 2020 era. So we need just kind of a general Nerds for Humanity song. So, or tune or whatever. So we'll do that. Last thing I want to do is highlight some of the top trending of the people.us candidates. So again, this is like Yelp for political candidates. The order is completely based on who has gotten the most recent approval votes, who's trending by definition. And so if you go to ofthepeople.us, here we're going to risk freezing, but let's live dangerously, nerds. You only live once, right? Okay, who's trending on Of the People at this moment? You have Lan He Chen, who is actually, I would describe him as a moderate Republican running for California State Controller. Gary Vautour, Max Steiner, Jay Chen, and Stephen Houlihan. So check them out. If you want to learn more about them, you just click on their profile picture and you can see a little bit of a description. You can watch their little intro video. You can see some of their recent tweets. And then if you really want to click the approve button, it kind of moves them up in the order. And then you can even see who's the all-time most approved candidates: Larry Sharp, David Kim, and Jermaine Johnson. So those have the most approval votes overall. But in terms of recent approval votes, it would be under popular, and that would be Lanny and Gary. And then our newest listings are Marcus Flowers, who is actually going to be on the show probably in a week or two. And he's running to challenge Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. So it's kind of cool. We'll have Marcus on the show and nerd out with him. So if you found this content useful and you're still here after almost an hour, you know, few things you can do to thank me. Not that you need to thank me, but few things you can do to help. Number one, easiest thing is just hit the like button. Smash that like button. Even if you're watching this on replay, it's great. Hello from previous times. Hit the like button and then subscribe if you haven't. You can also follow me on Twitter, Nerds for Humanity. Subscribe to our audio podcast. And then in the comments, let me know if there are future guests that you'd like to see on the show. I'm always looking for interesting people to interview or topics to cover. So with that, I'll say goodbye, nerds. See ya. Thanks again for the camera channel members. I'm liking it. I definitely think it is clearer, and it has a wider field of vision, so it's not as zoomed in. If I can figure out the CPU issues, that'll be great. Yeah, because there is a little bit of choppiness. All right, goodbye, nerds.